we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary, we do have a report that I encourage you to look at that's a look back into the last 10 years of what we've seen with our P3 Impact Award. But I'd ask those of us up here and our judges, so I'm going to change what we're doing just a tad and ask you all to think about one learning. So I'm going to go around with the 8 of us. We think about it. So what's one insight, one question that you have as you think about what you've seen over the past 10 years, what you've seen here, and as you look forward, what is it that you would sort of walk away with? What's one big impression you have from your experience in P3s? And while I give you all time to think about that, I'll go. Okay. So when I was sort of sitting here thinking about it, and people can laugh because if you don't know, I'm an accounting finance professor. And so I have a tendency to, and I'm from the business sector. So my insight or my thoughts are going to come from that perspective, whereas Tomas's might come from the government sector. But I think that one of the reasons I got very interested in this was, how do we think about the alignment of social objectives with business objectives? So let's be honest, a business objective is, yes, to have purpose, and to survive, they have to make a profit. Okay. So when I think about businesses engaging in P3s and the sustainability of that engagement, one of the things I ask is, if for it to be sustainable, there has to be something in it for each partner, right? And instead of it being a donation model, how does it become embedded in the business model? And so if you think about a sustainability of a partnership that includes business, it could be, well, we're sharing information because that creates new ideas and new markets. Or we're sharing information on supply chain because that helps us be more efficient and reduces cost. Or it's, we are actually making money, and it's a sharing of returns, right? Or we're figuring out ways to work together so we don't have to do things and cut cost. My particular interest, to show my bias, is something we don't talk about a whole lot, which is risk sharing among partnerships. How is it that when we come to these partnerships, we're actually really purposeful about the risk that we will encounter in doing partnerships across the world? How do we think about how we work as partners to mitigate those risks? Because those are really important lessons. You might not make a return, but if you can mitigate and share the risk, those are important lessons for us all to learn. But yet, I noticed in a lot of the applications and a lot of the discussions, we actually don't talk about how we've structured a partnership such that we've acknowledged the different risks across the organization, and how we've structured the partnership not just to achieve the financial and social returns, but to mitigate the risk across the parties. Because risk is a big deal, not just for the business sector, but for the governmental sector, as well as the not-for-profit sector, yet how we look at risk can differ. Right? And the timing of those risks, and we need to have those conversations as well. So as I look to the next 10 years, that's sort of what I hope we'll begin to see as a more pointed discussion or acknowledgement of how it is we're thinking about the sharing of risk. So I don't want to cold call, but if there's somebody either up on the stage or...
I'm happy to.
There we go.
I'm inspired by your words, so before I forget my chain of thought,
okay.
I'll do that. And I think in the last 10 years, what I have seen in this space, and I have been in this PPP space for over 20 years in 3 different agencies. And one thing that I'm happy to report to you, I no longer get the questions of what is partnerships? And the other one is, why would you want to do that? And that shows you the maturity of the space. So it's no longer about, why are we doing this and all that. It's now the how part. How could I get involved? Even I love your comment to her saying like, how do I get down with that? And that's the kind of stuff that I'm seeing more. So I've seen the maturity of the conversation is no longer about like, we do partnership for inclusivity or kumbaya. No, it's actually my business model gets advanced, my mission gets advanced, my market gets expanded, all those kind of things that we used to feel like territorial about. Now we don't. And the same thing I see from my own colleagues at the private and the public sector. We no longer shy away, or we're now embracing when businesses say we want to do this even for their purposes, because they're making profit, makes the whole thing sustainable, makes it more intangible. So to me, I've seen a huge maturity in a sense of the market emerging, that it's no longer just a cool thing to do, but it's a must thing to do. So that's my reflection.
Thank you. I'm going to ask. There we go.
I can just jump in.
Okay.
Well, because I have to jump in on that, just adding to your comments and then yours as well from a private sector perspective. My head is just bobbing. Yes, yes, yes to everything you said. I do have to give credit where credit's due to one of my former employers who really, I think, just the term for this concept is spot on, which the hat tip to MasterCard is commercially sustainable social impact. And that's what it is. It does need to be tied to the business, because sort of the old school check writing philanthropy of here you go, hope it goes well, let's talk next year, and then poof, that budget has gone away. But if it is tied to the core business, you can do well by doing good, which I think is the moral of the story at the end of the day. And one last shameless HP plug, and then I'll pass it over. But the example there is we've dedicated to account for every piece of paper that runs through our printers, regardless of brand, by 2030, which is very ambitious. So how do we do that? We don't know, but we asked the World Wildlife Fund, and they have the expertise, they have the knowledge, and we said to them, what would it take? So we're really excited that we are working to conserve over 1 million acres of forests. That's 5 times the size of New York City, where we are now, and without them, we wouldn't have been able to do it. So that's just my last shameless plug, and then I will pass it over to my other esteemed judges.
Thanks for that. And just adding on to what Mary and Thomas said, I think working on a program which itself kind of works with 100 plus partners across the spectrum, what we have realized is that besides risk sharing, it's the realization between the partners that efficiency gains of by working together are much, much higher than trying to do everything on your own and reinventing the wheel every time. And that's what we have seen, at least in our program and across the board as well. Wherever public-private partnerships have worked, partners have come together at an equal level and kind of seen the efficiency gains. And then there again, this whole aspect of ensuring that each partner gets the voice and gets the kind of platform to present their priorities becomes very, very critical as well. So broadly speaking, risk sharing, yes, definitely, but more important is also ensuring that partners have the equal play in things, and that's what can kind of lead to betterment of the entire partnership.
Yeah, thank you.
I would.
Oh, go ahead.
I just kind of riffing off of that too, and both Mary and Tomas, what you were saying. I think one thing that stood out about all of the finalists we've heard from today is a really deep understanding of the problem. And I think that might sound like a very simple and straightforward thing, but truly understanding the complexities of some of these very challenging and convoluted issues that are often taking place in these very fragile contexts is not to be underestimated. I mean, really being able to understand, not only what from our point of view, sitting in New York in a conference room might think would be impactful, but what do the people on the ground actually feel would be impactful? What do the regulators in that market think would be impactful? What do the other intermediaries who are out there think would be impactful? And so it's been interesting seeing whether it's Luminous Fund or Airlink or the DIB that we just heard from. It's been interesting seeing that there's this through line around really unpacking not just kind of the high level outcomes that folks want to see changed, but really what are the kind of cascading tiers of actions and activities and steps that need to happen to get those outcomes to shift? Where do you start for that? Do you start with the financial plumbing? Do you start with wraparound services to underserved communities? Do you start with fixing a mixed match of supply and demand in a logistics chain? And I think that's really kind of compelling. And it kind of gets back to, Mary, what you were saying earlier about then being able to use that deep understanding of the problem to identify what the pain points are across all the different partners and really make sure that as you build something in a partnership, that you're building towards the same shared goal.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll close the judges' set of reflections. I come from a development bank, and I worked at the public sector for 5 years before that in Colombia. So I think for me, the inspiring question that you ask about, what do you see in the next 10 years? I think one of the most impressive things here is that a lot of these models can be scalable and can be replicated. I mean, we see right now with the whole conversation on the SDG agenda, the fact that 12% of the SDG goals are only on track of being met. In Latin America, none of them. There's definitely a lot more need than there is money. So we definitely need to innovate, and we need to see how we can scale and mobilize more resources to be able to do it. So I think on the micro level, the risk sharing, the scalability, is key. But also, I think what I find very interesting here is that they're addressing some of the biggest needs that we have. To get to the biggest lever for getting out of poverty, and it actually takes like 11 generations, is education. So not to have finalists on education would be crazy, and I think that's something that's amazing here. Not to have, I love the reflection of our last speaker, where she said, at the beginning we thought that 200 million was too much of a bite, and 2 to 3 years later, that's not enough. Like, that's the reflections that we would like to see, how we can have more innovation and bigger innovation to attend that gap that seems that with the urgency is growing strong where we don't have yet. So it's more of a macro perspective from a development bank, but looking at all the applications, not just the finalists, the fact that you have a lot of innovation, the fact that you have different types of partners coming in, and that you have models that can be replicated, not just across regions within a country, but within continents and perhaps other continents, is something that I would love to see more and more in this global platform like Concordia. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will, I'm going to pass the baton in a second. I'll only close with something from, I'm very sad. This is my last time being involved. I'm going to pass the baton to Vidya at Darden. But I think one of the things that I find very fascinating over the last 10 years is the learnings that we get from many of the global partnerships. I always wonder sometimes, why don't we think more about how we bring that into some of the places in the United States that need development? When I was involved with P3s in a particular situation, I remember we took our learnings from sub-Sahara Africa and brought them into DC, into some of the places in the District of Columbia that didn't have the resources that maybe other areas of DC have. So I think sometimes we think of this as, the developing world, or the developed world teaching the developing world. And I actually think in this dialogue, this global dialogue, there's so much to be learned in the developing world that we can actually bring back and deploy into places in the United States that may have been forgotten. So we should be sharing information and thinking about where we can deploy that information also in different aspects of the United States, whether in our urban environment or rural environment. But I'm going to turn to Vidya. Oh, sorry.
Can I interrupt?
Absolutely.
Mani, I want you to have the last word. But I must
give it to you.
interject. This is not in the script, but Mary Margaret mentioned earlier about let's look at the next 10 years. This favorite quote that I heard from a song by John Legend that says, "The future started yesterday and we're already late." And I want to pay tribute to Mary Margaret right here. And I've never told this to her. 11 years ago, I got a call from Matt Swift. And he said, I need you to talk to, I think he was alma mater of UVA. And he said, I need you to talk to a professor for me, and I want to talk to you guys. And I'm like, what does this do? I'm a Virginia Tech guy, so I was like, not sure if I would take that call. But I said, I got on the call, and this is earlier on, obviously, even Concordia was new in that sense. And we got on the call, and Mary Margaret got on the call, and essentially, her pitch was so beautiful because it wasn't less to do about, we want you to do this with us. She was just like, I'll do you guys a favor. Because this partnership game that you guys talking about, that you're promoting, lacked rigor, lacked like academic scrutiny. And she came at it from that angle and said, we want to, I want to be in the strain of creating PPPs, but you guys need to get this rigor, and this P3 Impact Award will do that. And that was her idea, and she came out, obviously she had me at hello at that point. And we joined in, and I kid you not, And not only we are satisfied by the outcome of it, the testimony of what the 5 organizations you heard is a testament to that. So I would want to say, without hesitation in my mind, that this award would not be where it is if it wasn't for her vision and leadership. And I really, really want to say that, sincerely. And I think the last 10 years will be called the Mary Margaret Frank decade of partnership. And we are not worthy of you. I love a word I want to say is, not only you are the Dean Frank to call you at the new school at UNC, but you are the Dean of Partnership, as far as I'm concerned. So I want to give it a hug, I'm sorry, because this has been amazing.
Bless you.
God bless you. Thank you so much. On that note, please.
So we're passing the baton to Vidya, who's just a lovely faculty member at Darden. And I don't know if Maggie is in the audience.
She's right there.
So Vidya, you are going to get the last word, but you should know that none of this happens
Yes, sure.
without Maggie.
Thank you very much for giving all of us a stage, a place to talk about the things that we do. And I say this knowing that there's a lot of work that has happened before us. There are people who have paved the way before we could come in, including, like we say here, Mary Margaret, you started this thing. Trust me, Thomas, there were a lot more tears flowing at Darden than there are on the stage. And you have a home when you come back. There you have a home here, right, anytime. But that's the passing of the baton that we also want to see going forward in each of the programs that we are in. Each of the programs and the P3 applications that you come in. You're coming with a mission. You're coming with an objective. You're coming with your passion. And even if the program gets through, the objective is not gone. Poverty, hunger, education, good health and well-being, clean water. Those are things that we want for our survival as we go forward. But then if you think of development, you are talking about peace. I've heard that a lot of times. How do you quantify peace? How do you quantify well-being? And yet that's what we are grappling with right now. There's a lot of awareness. There's a lot of angst. There's a lot of initiatives that are out there. And every program that we had up here talked about how do we scale? How do we get this across the different constituents that we care about? And that's exactly what we wanted to do when we looked at 10 years of history. That's exactly what we wanted to do at this point, because each program is unique on its own. But you take the 10 years of history, let's start thinking about what worked, how did it work? How did you find information when there was no visible data available? How did you create metrics when there was no metrics or no understanding of what that meant? And moving forward, how do you pass that baton now to the next and to the next program that comes in? So at the same time that we're having this conversation, I'm new to this. I've been here for a couple of years, but I've former life, I've been part of State Department on the GP side. I was on the ground when we were doing malnutrition programs in the Horn of Africa. And my passion, my work is supply chain sustainability. So by definition, you're working with someone else. Right? So how do you get that to work? So at the same time that we're having this conversation, there's a parallel conversation that's happening a few blocks away, the UN General Assembly on SDGs, where there's a lot of worry right now that we have gone back. Not that we have gone forward, that we have gone backwards, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic, that we're no longer at that point at which we can hit the 2030 development goals. And this is a moment for celebration, but it's also a moment for us to take a reflection of what now we can contribute to that bigger platform if we create. We know how to create platforms. We're no longer just talking about 3 partners or 4 partners. I've seen as many as 20 partners that you work with. that you work with well. And it's no longer a pilot if you've had 10 years of success. It's hard evidence, fact. Now, how do you do that bigger platform so that we can not break down, but break through and go towards an upward trajectory? A lot of places, at least there are 3 or 4 key places that I'd like to highlight. One, they're struggling with saying, I'm not getting information. I don't know how to collect. We're not able to collect the information and measure progress. You know how to do this. You know how to create that pathway. You know how to work with other people who may have the same mission, but not the same pathway. You know how to do that. The second one is every private company that you're bringing in, unlike you saying about talking about writing a check, they're bringing in their capabilities, they're bringing in their expertise, they're bringing in their resources, they're bringing in their business, which means it has to make sense. How do you do that? So that we can get together as a community, progress forward. Those are the 2 things I'm really looking forward in the next 10 years. That we are able to take this platform and as a community, make sure no one's left behind. That's my hope, that we can work with multilateral institutions, with development banks, with people on the ground, with amazing, amazing ideas that come from you, but you are the most critical part of that program. That's my hope. So thank you, Mary Margaret. Thank you, Thomas. And Cooper, last word is yours.
Well, thank you, Dr. Mani. Thank you, Dr. Mani, for your inspiring words. I'm very excited to be working with you for the next couple of years. But
Just
now,
a couple?
no. Now we're going to move into our polling for this session. So I invite you to please take out your phones and follow the instructions on screen by going to www.pigeonhole.at and entering the passcode Concordia23 in all caps. Reminder that polls will remain anonymous. So we have the poll up here. And the first question that we have is, as we celebrate the 10th anniversary of the P3 Impact Award, which of the following do you believe is the most critical for the success of P3s? Innovation and creativity, effective collaboration, sustainable impact, strong governance, or you're not sure? So it looks like sustainable impact has
I think that one looks like it's
a strong margin there. What do you think about that, Dr. Mani?
I think that's amazing. I think that's amazing. Let's take it, run with it, and codify it into everything that we do.
Love it.
Okay, so now moving on to our second question. Looking at the trends and best practices of cross-sectoral collaboration that the P3 Impact Award has witnessed over the past 10 years, in what way do you think future partnerships will most likely develop? They will become more localized. Collaborative with the private sector will increase. There will be increased compliance with growing amount of regulation. Cross-sectoral partners will evolve, but in a way not listed, or they will remain similar to current models. So Mary, it looks like you have some new partners coming your way with collaboration with the private sector.
All right.
But as we wrap up the polling, this also concludes the first day of programming at the 2023 Concordia Annual Summit. I want to say thank you for everyone for coming. And as we wrap up day 1, I want to express my gratitude to everyone. See you tomorrow at 8:45 on this stage with a morning of programming focused on finding sustainable and innovative solutions to climate challenges with our partner, the Zayed Sustainability Prize. Thank you and see you then.